welcome back on this channel. Thank you very much for stopping by. Today we're going to do a video that is not going to be a time-lapse. It's going to be a video from start to finish on how to do a sculpt and flat on a wooden board. And the first thing I want to show you is that you need to use some sandpaper on it, because these boards are a bit too smooth, and when you're going to blend the edges they tend to crack, especially if you use monster clay. Monster clay is a great clay, but because the oil doesn't stick as much as other clays. So all you need to do is just use some sandpaper. In this case we're using a P80, quite rough, and we're going to prep her in this way. Once we roughen up a bit the surface, I'm going to start to put the clay down. I don't have a plan for this. I'm just going to do something that is, let's say, a wound or something gross, something gory. Okay, so yeah, you see, monster clay doesn't really want to stick, but now that we make it a bit more rough, when we're going to put and blend the edges, they stay a bit better. So let's treat our fingers like if it's like a brush, without thinking too much. Obviously if you have a design or someone is asking you something specific, that is different. So you follow the instruction, the direction of the production, or whatever is the description of the prosthetic that is needed. When I do these kind of things right now, I just like to go for what I feel, and I don't like to think too much. In this way I go a little bit more organic feeling. Okay, so we're just gonna prep our base. When you put the clay, it's always nice that you keep your finger on the board, not straight, but with an angle, because, let's see if I can show you. When you put your finger with an angle, pressing on the edges, on the edges of the sculpt, you already have some sort of blending, and it will simplify instead of going like this and trying when it cools down to blend this area here. If you're quick enough, you can do it straight away, but it's always nice to start to have something that is close to a finish. Like this area here, you don't want to keep it like that. Don't leave the edges fragmented, because it will be a nightmare, because all this becomes silicone and you have to blend and stretch the edges of this kind of area. You want more something like that. It will be easier and neater. Okay. Now, something I spoke about before is how nicely monster clay react to heat and fire. In this case, you see what happened. The clay almost like auto level itself, but you need to be careful. Don't stay too much in one spot, because otherwise what happens is start to bubble, because the oil inside overheat. It's almost like when you're frying your chips and you don't want to make it bubble if it's too much. So let's say that we have this area here and we're happy with it. Okay, now I'm going to take a flat sculpting tool and start to get rid of some of the areas that we don't want. Start to work on the edges. This is not really a sculpting tool. This was a wooden stick, and I just shaped it in a way that I need it. Tongue sticks, wooden sticks. Basically, you start from something like this, and then you either take a Dremel, a blade, some sandpaper, and you shape it as you like it. And then it turns into this. What I like to do is to leave it overnight in olive oil. I know it sounds a bit like cliche because I'm Italian, but oil get absorbed by the sculpting tool and makes it work better and smoother on the clay because you don't have the roughness of the wood afterwards, because the oil stay there. Obviously you need to dry it out a little bit afterwards. You can't just take it out. I assume it will work better even because like this is oil-based clay and a sculpting tool with oil kind of like slide on each other, I guess. I don't know the chemistry on it about it, but I just know it works. I don't remember who told me about it, but this is it. Before starting to sculpt everything, I like to have a nicer, cleaner surface to work on. So I like to use these sponges. These are not the best. 3M does some abrasive sponges. The red and the green are the nicest one that you can use. And what you do is you dip in the sponge in acetone or alcohol. Acetone release a bit of the color that is inside the sponge, but what it does is give it a nice smooth surface to the sculpt. But you do this just from the beginning, at the beginning, you know, like even this is here, give it a nice clean. It doesn't mean it's going to be finished like that. We'll have to go back on it, but at least we have a nice clean start. With a soft sponge, we get rid of all the dust. You will see that there's a bit of white bits. There's the, again, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's just the clay gets separated. Before using fire again, make sure that you let the acetone evaporate completely, otherwise you say you sculpt on fire. I've done it in the past, I learned my lesson, and now I'm always trying to be as careful as possible. See? Now we have a really nice, smooth surface. Now, the clay cooled down a little bit, and let's say that we want to do something that is not a wound, but is more like an infection of some sort. So we're going to use bowl tools. These are fantastic for this kind of things, and I don't know other clays if they do this. Probably oil-based one can do it, but Monster clay is the best for this kind of stuff, especially when you're in a rush. Now you see all these elements that were left there, that they came out organically. I didn't plan them. So we can use that as a reference, as a start to do our infection. And we start like this. What I'm doing is almost like a drawing. I'm moving the clay away from the spots, creating like empty spaces. The mat, we're gonna fill it up later, might leave it like this. It depends on how we feel once we're finished. See, I push the clay up, I create other layers, I create different thicknesses. When you do infection of this kind, it's always nice not to leave everything in the middle, but you have like a fragmentation in the places where you do, well, where you place the infection basically. And it's always nice to have some, like a big area that is more centered, and then you have other little spots here and there, almost like if you picture a shotgun wound, where you have the center parts and then you have the other little holes that are like around it. In this way you distract the eye from focusing just in the middle. So now I'm being carried away a little bit too much. I'm doing too many like just around it. Okay, so let's leave it like this for now. Next step is our friend fire. You see there's some little bits there, especially the thin ones, that they start bubbling or burn a little bit too much. I mean, this happens. Another option is that you can use the heat gun, but the problem that I have with the heat gun is you have no control of where it goes, because you have like a bigger, wider range of melting. I'm trying to find words to explain something that I never had to explain as much as in these videos. So you go a little bit, you let it melt, and we have this right now. Now we need to let it cool down a little bit, because now it's way too soft. Okay, so we've been waiting a few minutes, and what we're gonna do is blend in some of this area here, because obviously we just randomly create those edges, and we don't want to keep them all of it. This is the base. Then we're going to decide if some of this are going to stay just on the surface, or we're going to create another layer on top of it. So you see all these little round bits, they're a bit too much like drops. We can't really keep it in the sculpt. They're not gonna look right. So I decide to turn it into just a layer of skin. See all these drops here. It's nice little drops, but we don't want to keep them. So we keep blending down all these areas here. Not everything. Maybe we do. It's very much about how you feel about it. Definitely this one's a bit too much. Yeah, this one looks like circles. So let's say, let's have a look around. This area there is fine. I don't want to leave too many like harsh shadows. Like this part here, you see this is so smooth here, and then you have this ring, this edges around, not ring. Okay, I think for this steps I'm happy. What I'm going to do is using fire again. This is one of the reasons why I love monster clay, because now you have all this imperfection in the sculpt. You hold those tool marks, and if you have to go there and smooth it down with the sculpting tools, it will take you some time. So what you do is just melt it. Some of the tool marks basically are still there, but a lot less and on a much faster pace. Now we wait a minute or two while I'm thinking what I want to do, and then we go back to the next step. A little tip for cooling down the clay that is too hot at the moment. Well, it's not now, but I just want to show you. If you don't have freezing spray, or you're in a country or weather that is too hot for the clay, to save a little bit of money. I know that acetone is not cheap and the fumes are not great, but you take a soft brush and you brush on the warm clay. You do 2 or 3 passes and let it evaporate, because when acetone evaporates it gets really cold, so the clay cool down. You don't have to wait as much. So next step, what we're gonna do, what we can do is to start to fill some of these areas here. Okay, because it's empty inside, but we want to create something that it continues the infection. So we use again bolt tools. We'll put some clay inside it. And we push it in. And we create extra strands of clay that it could be like flesh that is rotting, it could be other parts, it could be anything really. You don't have to stay there and worry too much. There's a lot of things that don't have to be anatomically correct or be part of something that like a real infection. You can take obviously in reference, real reference, and then readapt it from what you want, the result you want. But it's always nice to have extra things inside, because if you leave this, when then you have the prosthetic and you apply, you have a smooth area. But if you take a clay and, for example, you connect this corner with this other area, get stuck. See, you got some other elements, another layer. You blend in that, you cut it off with your sculpting tool, and then because the ball tools doesn't have a direction, doesn't have a front and back, top and bottom, is basically like a sphere. It allows you to work with it without needing to turn either the board or the sculpting tool. You can use it to rough it up, the texture on the edges, without pushing too much, because we already created those holes here and there. So what we want to do is just make the texture around the surface a little bit more broken. Because another thing you don't want is to have an area here that is all broken and then just skin texture. You want to show that there's, you know, a continuation, something is happening on the skin, or is starting to happen on the skin. Especially in the middle. Especially in the middle, don't leave anything smooth. You need to do something that keeps helping. I don't know how long it's gonna be, this video. Obviously you will know once you choose to watch it, but I chose this time to do like a full thing. No time lapse, not quick, and just literally discussing everything that I'm doing. A good way to do this kind of texturing is to have your hands almost shaking. Instead of trying to slowly design it, you just let your hand go up and down, pushing a bit more in some area, less in others. Like now I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna use the fire again to show you what happened. Just in these parts. You see? We have a rougher surface, something that is not smooth like that. So when we're going to do the texture, then all these layers one on top of the other, it will help give us that kind of like gross feeling. So I carry on a bit here and there. Like this area here is way too smooth. So we can go in there. But anyway, let's say we're quite happy with what we got right now. What I like to do in some areas like this, because now everything is quite flat, everything is on the same level, and I want to make it even more gross. So what I can do is to start an extra layer of clay. I know that I'm covering part of what I've done, but because there's no a real plan in this right now, I just follow the flow and try something. In this situation, instead of using your finger, to have a little bit more control, you can use bigger ball tools, either this, or you have something even bigger, like that. This is for cake decorating, I think, but I found them fantastic for sculpting. So what we've done is basically creating the underneath, okay, the inside of the wound, the inside of the infection, and then we're going to add some other stuff on top, because the point is, if you're trying to sculpt this all in one shot, meaning you create the clay and you start from the top and go inside, it kind of complicates your life a bit. And what you want is to have a layer and another layer, another layer, and this way the prosthetic, the sculpt, it will look more complex, more articulated, more interesting. See? And we can connect this to this, because why not? Whenever I have someone comes to me for advice, or when I was doing my sculpting lessons and courses, I always say, when you put the clay down and you press it on your sculpt, don't wait to cool down too much to do this, because it requires more work. So do it while it's soft. Plus, it is not very visible in camera because my hand is off most of the time, but I always have a piece of clay in my hand that I keep more soft, and when it's running out, it's getting smaller, I get another one, and I always keep it soft. In this way I always have some clay that is ready to be worked, because it might be that I don't need much, the whole pot cooled down, and so I have to stop to put in the microwave and heat it up again. But in this way, if I have enough, or I just need to take a little bit, I have always something soft, some soft clay in my hands, and I can manipulate. If I want to keep a form like this one, for example, and I don't want to smooth it down too much, I want to keep it, instead of using the sculpting tool from this side, I use it from this side, because the surface traction is less, and I just have little bits that can move. See, if I do it like this, I just scrape a little bit and I fill up the gap underneath. In this way I have this form that is not gone, still there. Same thing from here. If I do this, you see how it goes away, but if I do like that, Now this is really shallow, so it's not that visible, but I still had the shadow of that form that I want, where here I just want to blend it off, and with the same pressure you have a different result. And all this, it helps you to make the sculpt more interesting. And if I want, I attach this to this. We're gonna work underneath this area because we don't want to leave it like that, because this, if you mold it, the silicone will go underneath and it will rip it off. But for now, just because I want to have an idea of where to put the clay, I just leave it lifted a little bit. Let's make another strand of flash here. You see how I use the sculpting tool to cut the clay and keep it in place. I don't use my fingers because the fingers have too much surface. You have less control, because obviously the difference between this and this is a lot. Plus this one stick on the clay a lot more than this. We can go with the sculpting tool. This will help us give it to the clay a more fleshy surface, and at the same time it helps us pushing the clay down without having too much effect, because if I press it with my finger I squish it too much down. So at this point I see that here, based on what I'm doing, this is too flat. So I'm gonna bring some other holes. When I have strands like that, I round it up a bit, because now if I use the fire just to try to affect this, I will melt too much. So you need to help the forms with the sculpting tool. For example, now, little example. Here we have a lot of clay, okay? And here there's not much. So they're almost at the same level. So we want to have like a bigger gap. So what I'm gonna do is pushing the clay on the edges and then relocate what is underneath. And when we'll go with the fire, we have a nicer result. See, a lot of areas the original was just skin. I'm roughing them up a little bit to have the disease feeling. Alright, let's have a look what happened once we use fire in this area here. There you go. We'll get it to a nice point. So I'm going to make a more aggressive, more affected area here, and then it's going to disappear in this area, even just because I already see that I recorded 30 minutes of this. It's kind of like a long time for a YouTube video, but this is the amount of time that I want you to spend when you sculpt. Even more if you need it, especially if you're trying to learn or you're at the beginning of this journey. In the meantime, I would like to take advantage of this situation, let's say, to thank you for coming and watching this video. Please like and subscribe to the channel, like the videos, leave a comments, let me know what you want to see, what you want to learn. If you have any questions or ideas or anything, really, everything is welcome. Every like, every subscribe will help the channel. This video is going to be a first of a series of videos with no time lapse. They're going to be a bit long because this is the time it takes to make these things, but I think if some people, some sculptors, some artists, some beginners, students, I hope they're more interested in this kind of videos than the time lapse, because my idea is to generally teach what I do and how I do it. This is going to be the first that I will post on YouTube, but I will gradually stop doing it on YouTube, this ones, and there will be just a Patreon exclusive and leave just on YouTube time lapse and just quick things, because I have the feeling that if you're interested into this, you wouldn't spend on YouTube 40 minutes, an hour, and the way how YouTube and Patreon works are completely different. So like if you just decided you want to subscribe to my Patreon page and pay a subscription, that is not going to be, it's not going to be expensive. I'm not trying to trick anyone and paying a ton of money every month. I just want to keep it as low as possible. But if you want to pay and you pay to watch these videos, you want everything. You want every step. You want every minute of the sculpting process. You don't want a time lapse that cut off a lot of what it needs to be done. I remember watching years ago when I was trying to learn ZBrush. I was watching videos on how to sculpt in 3D. It was really frustrating because there was one time that I was doing this sculpting and say, okay, I was following step by step, and now I'll put a mask on, stretch the neck, and he didn't tell me how to take the mask on. I'm terrible with technology. That's why probably I will never learn how to do 3D sculpting, and I'm so resilient to learn it. But that guy forgot to say in the video. So it's like, and now what do I do? I think that was the day that I gave up. Because I thought, you know what, that's not for me. I need to touch the clay. Like, I wouldn't even be able to do something like this in 3D. It's fine. I will be a dinosaur in a few years' time. It's just one of the last few that still want to sculpt practically. I don't mind. Eventually, practical sculpting will be like vinyls, will be something for collectors, something that will have a different, and for me, bigger value. All right. Let's see. Okay, let's try to give a little bit more flame. Okay, soften down all this stuff, and then we're gonna go on this with the sculpting tools. Like most of the sculpting tools that I have, apart from these bowl tools, I made them myself, because every time that I do a sculpt, There's always something that I need that is different. For example, this one's all made it by myself, and each one does something. I know it looks like a bit overkill, but it depends on what I'm doing. They help me in a specific way. I will do probably a video one day to show each one of them, but for now we're going for this one. These are acupuncture needles. You can tell from this, and actually they're pretty good because having this, when you squeeze the brass tube, they stay there, they're not going anywhere. And because they're acupuncture needle, they're quite soft, so when you go on top of the clay, they don't affect it too much. Obviously it depends on how much pressure you put on it. I got others softer, but for now this is fine. Actually, let's put a bit of acetone. There you go. They use the sculpting tools even for texturing, just general texture, but at the moment what I'm trying to do is just try to blend everything that I've done together. So doing this on top, it breaks the tool marks, the different steps, levels, and give like a common texture to everything. So instead of looking like too many different things or patches that have been put together, you have something that looks more one thing. Try to avoid straight line, because straight line are harder to hide. You see my hand go almost like a half moon, half circle. Like this area here that go blends on the skin, we're gonna go a bit rougher. My wrist and the sculpting tool keeps moving in this way. So when it's all together, it emulates better the skin texture. Alright, so at this point, we want to use a brush. So there are many different kind of brushes that I got. I always cut them in this way. I learned this watching a Steve Wang video on St. Vincent School of Character Arts. I use it for painting because this way you can do a spatter using just the tip or the whole thing. But I do the same for sculpting because the concept is the same. What I'm doing here, if you look at the edges, the little balls, because this one doesn't have it, but this one does. I use a fire. Some quality of brushes, when you burn them, they leave a little ball at the end, and it's almost like using something like this, but more thick. So you dip in a bit of acetone, and it helps you having a nicer surface, because it's not just the hair of the brush, there's a little ball at the end that makes it a little bit more rough. Some areas have still the feeling of the clay that has been placed down, so in some areas I just push more than others. So after this, I'm gonna blend all the edges with this. I'm not gonna record it because it's gonna take a while and it's boring. So you start to do this on the edge, all around. Once I blend everything there, all the edges, a good way to make sure that you've done a good job is to pass the finger around the edges to make sure that you don't feel anything. Where you feel there's a step, you go again with this. So I'm passing the finger, I don't feel any difference. Here, I feel a difference. There's no transition, there's almost like a step. That's better. Okay, we're almost close. This is just like a rough wound, so we're not going too much into other details. What can we use now? What can we use now? So maybe we can try and use this one. It's a bit big, but for a bigger surface, it's quite good. So what I'll do is, in another video that I've done, there's a close-up slow motion of this process that is poking and pulling, because what I want to do is try to recreate this. There is not much of like long lines, they're all little lines that go like this, like that, like this, like that, like this, like that. So maybe we can use a smaller version. Maybe we can use this one. They break very easily, so that's why I make them myself. I don't even know if you can buy stuff like this. Probably at some point someone will start to make it and make money out of it, but I don't have patience to start selling sculpting tools. I'll teach you how to make it, and you make it by yourself. You save money, you make what you need based on what you need. It's like when I was doing working on Aquaman, the Fallen Kingdom, the second one. We needed to do skin texture for the fish people, and so I created this sculpting tool that gives me a chance to make scales. But this is a story for another video. You have to come back for that. I ain't giving you everything now. There's already 45 minutes of recording here. Alright. I'll see you when I finish all this, alright? I'll be back in a minute. Alright, so I changed sculpting tool. I started to use this one because I have a bit more control when I want to do the texture, and because it's harder I can press a little bit more, especially in this area in the middle when I want to give it a bit more rough feeling. So there's two things you can do at this point. You can brush everything off, or in some areas, you see all these little balls, you press them down. I'm gonna do it mostly close to the diseased area. You see how we stay all that? In this way, if you just press it randomly here and there, yes, some parts, an extra layer of texture that you don't have to worry about creating afterwards, because it's already been done. We brush off everything else with acetone. a softer brush, get rid of what we don't like, and there you go. We're almost finished. Now, because this is a wound, the inside we want it a little bit more shiny. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a small soft brush. We're going to dip it in white spirit. We're going to brush it inside these areas. Why is that? The clay is going to absorb the white spirit and will create a first layer inside these areas that is soft. So once we're going to use the fire, try to use it just inside, because if you go out, the effect doesn't work as well. And it will melt and make it more smoother, almost shiny. I can put it here and that. Okay. We're gonna now give a nice gentle flame. There you go. Last step for me will be taking a brush and put white spirit on everywhere else. I always like to give a stipple on top of the old sculpt, either with this kind of brushes, or if the surface is bigger, you get like a normal brush, but with the scissor you cut it like that, so in this way it's not flat, even. You see, some bits are longer than others. In this way you break the surface and you create an extra super fine layer that blend everything together. And that's it. This is how you do a wound. Oh, you can always do another step, that is using a brush like this. You have some clay, for example, here. Now it's a bit messy because it's next to it. Usually I have something like that. It's like already melted clay. And you do a bit of spattering on top of it. So yeah, there you go. You clean the edges. You let the white spirit evaporate properly. You don't want that stuff to stay on the edges too much, because when you mold it and then you run the prosthetic in silicone, all those bits will catch the silicone and then your cut plastic edges are not going to be nice for melting. But yeah, we've done a gross wound. So I really hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's going to help you improve your skills. I'm not going to say enough thank you for stopping by and watching the whole video. Let me know if you have any questions. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.